The August sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty stretch of land where Declan Walsh stood, his weathered hands resting on the fence post he had hammered into the ground with his own father 20 years ago. And he could see them coming from a mile away. 3 men in dark suits riding in a fancy carriage that had no business being out here in the New Mexico territory in 1878, kicking up clouds of red dust that caught the light like fire. Declan watched them approach with narrowed eyes, his jaw set in that stubborn line his mother used to say meant trouble. At 32 years old, he had built this ranch from nothing but sweat and dreams, every acre soaked with memories of his parents who had passed 5 years back, leaving him alone with the cattle and the endless sky. The Walsh Ranch sat on 500 acres of prime grazing land just outside Oro Grande, New Mexico, where the grass grew thick near the creek that cut through the property like a silver ribbon, and the mountains rose in the distance like sentinels guarding secrets. The carriage rolled to a stop 20 feet from where he stood, and the 3 men climbed out, brushing dust from their expensive suits with obvious distaste. The tallest one, a man with silver hair and a practiced smile, stepped forward first, extending his hand. "Mr. Walsh, I presume." "I am Edward Thornton, representative of the Central Pacific Railroad Company. These are my associates, Mr. Harrison and Mr. Blake." Declan did not take the offered hand. "I know who you are. You have been buying up land from here to Santa Fe. Word travels." Thornton lowered his hand, his smile never wavering. "Then you know we make generous offers, very generous. We are prepared to offer you $15,000 for your property, Mr. Walsh. That is more money than most men see in a lifetime. The answer is no." Perhaps you did not hear the amount. $15,000. Cash money. You could buy yourself a fine house in San Francisco, live like a king for the rest of your days. I heard you just fine, and I said no. This land is not for sale. The second man, Harrison, stepped forward with a ledger in his hands. "Mr. Walsh, be reasonable. The railroad is coming through whether you like it or not. We need this route for the expansion west. Every other landowner in this territory has seen the wisdom of selling. You are the last holdout." "Then I guess you have a problem," Declan said, his voice flat and final. "Because some things are not for sale at any price." Thornton's smile finally faltered. "Mr. Walsh, I urge you to reconsider. The railroad represents progress, civilization. Surely you cannot stand in the way of the future for mere sentiment." "This is not sentiment. This is my home. My father broke his back clearing this land. My mother planted every tree in that orchard yonder. I buried them both on that hill overlooking the creek. You cannot put a price on that, and I would appreciate it if you gentlemen would leave my property now." The 3 men exchanged glances, and something cold flickered in Thornton's eyes. "Very well, Mr. Walsh, but I suspect we will be speaking again soon. Good day." Declan watched them leave, his gut tight with unease. Men like that did not take no for an answer easily, and he knew this fight was far from over. But he had meant every word. This land was his legacy, his blood and bone, and he would die before he let some railroad company tear it apart for their iron tracks. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Declan rode into Oro Grande to pick up supplies and maybe hear what folks were saying about the railroad. The town had grown considerably in the past decade, with a proper main street now, lined with wooden buildings that housed the general store, the saloon, the sheriff's office, and a handful of other establishments. The railroad talk had everyone stirred up, half the town excited about the prosperity it might bring, the other half worried about what they might lose. He was just tying his horse outside the general store when he heard the commotion. A woman's voice, clear and angry, cut through the evening air. I already told you no. Get your hands off me. Declan turned to see a young woman backing away from two rough-looking men outside the saloon. She was tall and slender, with dark auburn hair pinned up in a way that suggested she had been traveling, and she clutched a carpet bag against her chest like a shield. The men were advancing on her, leering. "Come on now, sweetheart," one of them slurred, clearly drunk. "We are just being friendly. A lady like you should not be wandering around alone after dark. We are offering to escort you." "I said no," she repeated, her voice steady despite the fear Declan could see in her eyes. He crossed the street in 4 long strides, his hand resting on the grip of his Colt revolver. "The lady said no. I suggest you boys find somewhere else to be." The two men turned, sizing him up. Declan was not the biggest man in the territory, but he was solid muscle from years of ranch work, and he had a reputation for being able to handle himself. The men seemed to recognize him because they backed off, muttering curses under their breath as they stumbled back into the saloon. The woman let out a breath, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Thank you. I appreciate the assistance." "You are welcome, miss. You new in town?" "I just arrived on the stage this afternoon. I am looking for lodging. The driver said there was a boarding house, but I cannot seem to find it in the dark." Declan noticed her accent, refined and Eastern, nothing like the rough frontier speech he was used to. "Mrs. Henderson runs a respectable place 2 streets over. I can show you the way if you like." She hesitated, clearly weighing whether she could trust him, then nodded. "That would be kind of you, Mr. Walsh. Declan Walsh. Lily Thorne. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Walsh." They walked through the dusty streets, Declan leading his horse by the reins. The evening was cooling down, a welcome relief from the brutal heat of the day. Lily Thorne walked with her back straight, her chin up, despite the obvious exhaustion in her eyes. "What brings you to Oro Grande, Miss Thorne?" Declan asked, making conversation. "It is a long story," she said, then seemed to reconsider. "I am a schoolteacher, or I was back in Boston. I answered an advertisement for a teaching position here. The town council is supposedly building a schoolhouse. They are, been talking about it for 2 years now, finally got the lumber ordered last month. Well, I hope they finish it soon. I sold everything I own to make this journey." She said it matter-of-factly, but Declan heard the underlying worry in her voice. "You came all the way from Boston alone." "I did. There was nothing left for me there after my father passed 6 months ago. He was a professor at the university. When he died, I found out he had debts I never knew about. The creditors took the house, the furniture, everything. Teaching was all I knew, and there were no positions available in Boston. So when I saw the advertisement for a frontier teacher, I thought perhaps I could start fresh." There was something in her voice, a quiet strength mixed with vulnerability, that made Declan look at her more closely. She was beautiful, he realized, not in the painted way of saloon girls, but in a natural, refined way that reminded him of the illustrations in his mother's old books. She had green eyes that caught the lamplight from the windows they passed, and a smattering of freckles across her nose that suggested she was not as delicate as she appeared. They reached Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, a 2-story wooden building with a welcoming porch. Declan knocked on the door, and a plump woman with gray hair and a kind face answered. "Declan Walsh, as I live and breathe. What brings you to town this evening?" "Evening, Mrs. Henderson. I have brought you a new boarder. This is Miss Lily Thorne, the new schoolteacher, Mrs." Henderson's face lit up. "Oh, my dear, we have been expecting you. Come in, come in. You must be exhausted from your journey." Lily turned to Declan, offering him a genuine smile for the first time. "Thank you again, Mr. Walsh. You have been very kind. Just being neighborly, Miss Thorne. Welcome to Oro Grande." He tipped his hat and turned to leave, but he found himself thinking about her green eyes and the way she had stood up to those men despite being clearly terrified. Lily Thorne had spirit, that much was certain. Over the next few weeks, Declan found himself riding into town more often than usual, always with some excuse about needing supplies or checking on his bank account. The truth was, he kept hoping to catch a glimpse of Lily Thorne, and more often than not, he did. She had thrown herself into preparing for the school, spending her days at the construction site helping where she could, organizing donated books and slates, and getting to know the families whose children would be her students. They ran into each other at the general store one morning, both reaching for the same bag of coffee beans. Their hands touched, and Lily pulled back quickly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I apologize," she said. "You were here first." "No, please take it. I can get the next one." She smiled at him, and Declan felt something shift in his chest. "How are you settling in, Miss Thorne?" "Quite well, thank you. Everyone has been very welcoming." "Well, almost everyone." Her smile faltered slightly. "I had some men come by yesterday, asking questions about who I was and why I came here. They made me rather uncomfortable." Declan's jaw tightened. "What kind of men?" "They wore suits, said they were with the railroad company." "I do not know why they would care about a schoolteacher, but they seemed very interested in who I knew in town and where I spent my time." A cold feeling settled in Declan's stomach. The railroad men were still around, and if they were bothering Lily, it was probably because they had seen him with her. They were looking for leverage, ways to pressure him into selling. "If they bother you again, you tell Sheriff Cooper right away, you hear me?" "I will." "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Walsh." "Declan, you can call me Declan. Only if you call me Lily." He found himself grinning like a fool. "All right then, Lily." They started seeing each other regularly after that, always in the casual way of people who just happened to be in the same place at the same time, though Declan suspected they were both making those coincidences happen. He learned that she loved books more than anything, that she could recite poetry from memory, that she had never ridden a horse before coming west and was terrified of them. She learned that he had been running the ranch alone since his parents died, that he loved the land with a fierce passion, that he played the harmonica his father had given him when he could not sleep at night. One Sunday afternoon, Declan worked up the courage to ask if she would like to see the ranch. To his delight and terror, she said yes. He picked her up in his wagon, freshly washed and wearing his best shirt, and drove her out to the Walsh property. Lily sat beside him, her eyes wide as she took in the vast expanse of land, the cattle grazing peacefully, the orchards his mother had planted now heavy with fruit. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "I had no idea it was so big. 500 acres, every inch of it fought for and earned." He pulled the wagon to a stop near the main house, a sturdy ranch house his father had built with hand-hewn logs. "This was where I grew up. My parents are buried just over that hill." They walked through the property, Declan pointing out landmarks and telling her stories. He showed her the creek where he used to catch fish as a boy, the old oak tree where his father had built him a swing, the pasture where they ran the best breeding stock. Lily listened to everything, asking questions, genuinely interested. "I understand now," she said quietly as they stood on the hill overlooking the creek, "why you refuse to sell. This is not just land. It is your history, your family." "That is exactly it. Those railroad men, they look at this and see dollar signs and routes on a map. They do not see what it really is." Lily reached out and touched his arm gently. "Some things are not for sale at any price." He looked down at her, this Eastern woman with her books and her refined manners who somehow understood in a way few others did, and he felt his heart do something dangerous. He was falling for Lily Thorne, falling hard and fast, and he did not know what to do about it. "Would you like to stay for supper?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "Nothing fancy, just stew, but I make a decent meal." "I would love to." They spent the evening in his kitchen, Lily insisting on helping despite his protests that she was a guest. They worked side by side, Declan chopping vegetables while Lily stirred the pot, and the domestic simplicity of it made his chest ache with longing. This was what he wanted, he realized. Not just the land, but someone to share it with, someone who understood its value, someone like Lily. After they ate, they sat on the porch watching the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. Declan pulled out his harmonica and played a soft melody his father had taught him, something slow and sweet. Lily leaned back in her chair, her eyes closed, a peaceful expression on her face. "That is lovely," she murmured. "What is it called?" "I do not rightly know. My pa just called it the evening song. He used to play it for my ma when they sat out here after a long day." "It sounds like love," Lily said softly, then opened her eyes, looking embarrassed. "I mean, it sounds like it was written for someone you love." "I think it was." Declan set the harmonica down, his heart pounding. "Lily, I know we have not known each other long, but I want to be honest with you. I enjoy your company more than I have enjoyed anyone's in a very long time. I would like to call on you properly, if you would permit it." Her face lit up with a smile that took his breath away. "I would like that very much, Declan." He drove her back to town that night feeling like he was floating, and when he helped her down from the wagon, their hands lingered together just a moment longer than necessary. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Declan's life. He rode into town every Sunday after that, and they would spend the afternoon together, walking through Oro Grande or having picnics by the creek on his property. Lily told him about her life in Boston, about growing up surrounded by books and learning, about the loneliness of losing her father and finding herself adrift. Declan told her about the ranch, about his dreams of expanding the herd, about the satisfaction of working the land with his own hands. They were from different worlds, but somehow they fit together like two pieces of a puzzle that had been waiting to be joined. The schoolhouse was finished in late September, and Lily threw herself into teaching with a passion that Declan admired. She had 15 students ranging from 6 to 14 years old, and she treated each one with patience and kindness, even the troublemakers who tested her boundaries. Declan would sometimes ride by during the day just to hear her voice drifting through the open windows, reading from a book or explaining arithmetic problems. But the happiness was shadowed by the ongoing pressure from the railroad. Thornton and his men had not given up. They returned to the ranch twice more, each time increasing their offer. $20,000, $25,000, $30,000. Each time Declan refused, and each time the threats became less subtle. "You are making powerful enemies, Mr. Walsh," Thornton had said during the last visit, his voice cold. "The railroad has ways of getting what it wants. It would be a shame if something unfortunate happened to your property. Fires can be so unpredictable in this dry country." Declan had forced himself to stay calm, though his hand itched to reach for his gun. "You threatening me, Thornton?" "Not at all. Simply stating facts." "Good day, Mr. Walsh." After they left, Declan hired 2 ranch hands, men he trusted, to help keep watch at night. He was not going to let the railroad intimidate him, but he was not foolish enough to leave his property unguarded either. Lily noticed the tension in him, the way he scanned the horizon constantly when they were at the ranch, the way his hand never strayed far from his gun. One Sunday in October, as they sat by the creek sharing sandwiches she had packed, she finally asked him about it. "Declan, what is wrong? You have been different lately, distracted." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. The railroad is not giving up. They have been making threats, talking about fires and accidents. I've got men watching the place at night, but I cannot shake the feeling that something bad is coming. Lily's face paled. They threatened you. Declan, that is serious. Have you told the sheriff? I have. Cooper says his hands are tied unless they actually do something. Words are not crimes. What will you do? What I have been doing. Hold my ground. Protect what is mine. He looked at her, his expression serious. Lily, I need you to understand something. This fight might get ugly. If you do not want to be associated with me, I would understand. I would not hold it against you. She reached out and took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Declan Walsh, I am not some delicate flower that wilts at the first sign of trouble. I lost everything once before, and I rebuilt my life from nothing. I am not afraid of a fight, and I am certainly not going to abandon you when you need support. He stared at her, this brave, beautiful woman who had somehow become essential to his happiness. And before he could think better of it, he leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when she kissed him back, her hand coming up to cup his cheek, it deepened into something that made his whole body come alive. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lily's cheeks were flushed and her eyes were bright. I have been wanting to do that for weeks, Declan admitted, his voice rough. I was beginning to think you never would, she said with a small laugh. I love you, Lily. I know it is fast and maybe I am a fool for saying it so soon, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I love you. Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. I love you too, Declan. I think I have since that first night when you helped me find the boarding house. They kissed again, and Declan felt like everything in his life was finally falling into place. He had his land, his home, and now he had Lily. He was not going to let the railroad or anyone else take that away from him. The trouble came on a cold November night. Declan was in the barn checking on a mare about to foal when he heard the sound of hoofbeats, too many of them, moving fast. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside just as the riders appeared, maybe a dozen men with torches, their faces covered with bandanas. Walsh, one of them shouted. This is your last warning. Sell to the railroad or lose everything. Before Declan could respond, they threw their torches. One landed on the roof of the barn, another in the hay storage, a third near the house. Fire bloomed in the darkness, hungry and fast, and Declan knew he had only seconds to act. He fired a shot in the air, and his ranch hands came running from the bunkhouse. Together they fought the fires, hauling buckets of water from the creek, beating at flames with blankets, working frantically to save what they could. The riders had disappeared into the night, but the damage was done. By the time they got the fires out, the barn was half destroyed, the hay storage was gone, and part of the house roof had caved in. Declan stood in the wreckage, covered in soot and ash, his hands blistered from the heat, and felt rage like he had never known. "Boss, you all right?" One of his hands, a young man named Tommy, asked. "I am fine. Is everyone accounted for?" "Yeah, we are all here. What do you want to do?" "I want you to ride into town and get the sheriff. Tell him what happened. I am going to document everything." As Tommy rode off, Declan walked through the damage, his mind working. This was arson, plain and simple. The railroad had gone too far and there had to be consequences. But even as he thought it, he knew the reality. Men like Thornton had money and power. They could buy witnesses, intimidate juries. Getting justice was not going to be easy. He was still surveying the damage when he heard a wagon approaching fast. His hand went to his gun, but then he recognized Mrs. Henderson's old wagon, and his heart lurched when he saw Lily climbing down before it had even fully stopped. "Declan, oh God, are you hurt?" She ran to him, her hands frantically checking him over. "I am fine, just some burns. How did you hear?" Tommy stopped at the boarding house on his way to get the sheriff. Declan, who did this? The railroad, or men they hired, same difference. Her face hardened with an anger he had never seen before. This is my fault. They saw us together and they are using me to pressure you. No. He grabbed her shoulders gently but firmly. This is not your fault. This is on them, on their greed and their complete disregard for anything but their own profit. What are you going to do? I do not know yet, but I am not selling. I will rebuild and I will keep fighting. Lily looked at the burned buildings, then back at him. Then I will fight with you. We will figure this out together. Sheriff Cooper arrived an hour later, took statements, examined the evidence and promised to investigate. But Declan could see the doubt in his eyes. Without witnesses willing to testify, without proof linking the attack to the railroad, there was little the law could do. The next few weeks were a blur of rebuilding. Declan and his ranch hands worked from dawn to dusk, repairing the barn, replacing the hay storage, fixing the house. Lily came out every weekend to help, cooking meals for the workers, organizing supplies, doing whatever she could. The people of Oro Grande rallied around them too, neighbors bringing lumber and nails, offering labor and support. But the railroad was not done. Thornton showed up again in early December with an offer that made Declan's blood boil. $50,000, Mr. Walsh. Final offer. And in exchange, we will forget about the unfortunate incident with the fire. No charges will be filed against you for interfering with railroad business. Interfering. You burned my property. You have proof of that. Because I have witnesses who will testify that you threatened railroad employees, that you were acting erratically. A jury might see the fire as an unfortunate accident caused by your own negligence. Declan stepped forward, his fists clenched. Get off my land before I throw you off. Thornton smiled coldly. You are making a mistake, Walsh, but have it your way. Just remember, when you lose everything, you had your chance. After he left, Declan stood alone in his partially rebuilt barn, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on him. He was one man against a corporation with unlimited resources and no scruples. How long could he really hold out? He was still standing there when Lily found him, having walked from where she had hidden during Thornton's visit. I heard everything, she said quietly. Declan, maybe you should consider taking the money. $50,000 could buy you land somewhere else, somewhere they cannot reach you. It is not about the money, he said, his voice hollow. It is about what is right. If I give in now, what does that say? That might makes right. That if you have enough money and power, you can take whatever you want from whoever you want. It says that you are a survivor. That you know when to fight and when to retreat. She moved closer, taking his hands. I do not want to lose you, Declan, and if you keep fighting, they might do worse than burn buildings next time. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I know, but I cannot give up, not on this. Not on the only home I have ever known. Then we will find another way. There has to be another way. They stood there together in the barn, holding each other against the cold and the uncertainty, and Declan felt his resolve strengthen. He was not alone in this fight anymore. He had Lily, and together they would find a way through. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A week before Christmas, a man rode up to the ranch on a fine black horse, dressed in expensive clothes but with the weathered face of someone who had spent years in the sun. He introduced himself as Marcus Dalton, a lawyer from Santa Fe. Mr. Walsh, I represent a group of landowners who have been fighting the Central Pacific Railroad for the past 2 years. We have been following your case with interest. Declan invited him inside, where Lily was helping prepare dinner. She stayed to listen as Dalton explained. The railroad has been using these same tactics across 3 territories. Threats, intimidation, arson, even murder in some cases. but they have been careful to cover their tracks to make it look legal and above board. However, we have been gathering evidence, testimonies from victims, documents that show a pattern of criminal behavior. "What does this have to do with me?" Declan asked. "Your case could be the one that breaks it open. You have documentation of the fire, witnesses, and most importantly, you have refused to be intimidated. If you are willing to testify, to go on record about the threats and the arson, we can build a case that might stop the railroad's expansion entirely, at least until they agree to negotiate fairly." Lily leaned forward. How dangerous would this be for Declan? Dalton did not sugarcoat it. Very. The railroad has resources and connections. They will fight back hard, but with enough people willing to stand up, we can win this. We have a federal judge in Santa Fe who is sympathetic to our cause. If we can get this in front of him, I believe we can get an injunction stopping the railroad's land acquisitions pending a full investigation. Declan looked at Lily, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. This was risky, possibly deadly. But it was also a chance to fight back properly, to make a real difference. "I will do it," he said. "Whatever you need, I will testify." Dalton smiled grimly. "Good. I will need you in Santa Fe day after tomorrow. Bring all your documentation, any witnesses willing to testify, and be prepared for the railroad to come at you with everything they have got." After Dalton left, Lily turned to Declan. "Are you sure about this?" "No, but it is the right thing to do." He took her hands. "Lily, I need to ask you something. When this is over, assuming we win and I still have the ranch, would you consider staying here, permanently, as my wife?" Her eyes widened. "Declan, are you asking me to marry you?" "I do not have a ring yet, and this is probably the worst proposal in history, but yes, I am asking. I love you, Lily. I want to build a life with you here on this land. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to have children with you and grow old watching the sunsets from our porch. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling that brilliant smile that made his heart race. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you, Declan Walsh. Ring or no ring, fancy proposal or no, my answer is yes." He kissed her then, pouring all his love and hope and fear into it, and she kissed him back with equal passion. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The trip to Santa Fe was tense. Declan, Lily, and Dalton rode together in a stagecoach, constantly watching for signs of trouble. The railroad had eyes everywhere, and Dalton warned them to trust no one. They stayed in a small hotel under assumed names and met with the other landowners in secret. There were 8 others, men and women from across New Mexico territory who had suffered at the hands of the railroad. They shared their stories, each one more heartbreaking than the last. Families driven from their homes, businesses destroyed, lives ruined. But they also shared a determination to see justice done. The hearing before Judge Morrison took place in a federal courthouse, an imposing building that seemed designed to intimidate. Thornton was there with a team of lawyers, all expensive suits and cold smiles. But Dalton was prepared. One by one, the landowners testified. They told of threats and bribes, of fires and beatings, of loved ones who had disappeared after refusing to sell. Declan told his story, presenting the documentation of the fire, the sheriff's report, the timeline of increasingly aggressive offers. Lily sat in the gallery, her presence giving him strength. The railroad's lawyers tried to discredit them, suggesting they were liars motivated by greed, that the fires were accidents, that the threats were misunderstandings. But Dalton had done his homework. He presented letters, telegrams, documents that showed a clear pattern of criminal behavior authorized from the highest levels of the railroad company. The final blow came when Dalton called a surprise witness, a former railroad employee named Callahan, who had kept records of every illegal act the company had ordered. He had been waiting for someone brave enough to stand up to them, and now he laid it all out, chapter and verse. By the time the testimony was done, Judge Morrison's face was like thunder. He did not even need to deliberate long. "I am issuing an immediate injunction against the Central Pacific Railroad Company," he announced. "All land acquisitions in New Mexico Territory are suspended pending a full criminal investigation. Furthermore, I am ordering the company to pay restitution to all affected landowners for damages caused by their agents. Failure to comply will result in federal charges. This hearing is adjourned." The courtroom erupted. The landowners were cheering, hugging each other, crying with relief. Declan looked back at Lily and saw tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. They had won. Thornton and his lawyers stormed out, but not before Thornton locked eyes with Declan. "This is not over," he mouthed, but Declan just stared back steadily. Let him make whatever threats he wanted. The law was on their side now. The ride back to Oro Grande was triumphant. News had spread fast, and when they arrived, half the town was waiting to greet them. There was a celebration in the saloon, with people buying Declan drinks and shaking his hand until his arm was sore. But all he wanted was to be alone with Lily. They slipped away from the party and walked to the schoolhouse, where they could see the stars spread out across the vast New Mexico sky. "We did it," Lily said, leaning against him. "I still cannot quite believe it. We did. And now we can actually plan our future without wondering if it will all be taken away." He turned to face her, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I got this in Santa Fe. It is not much, but I wanted you to have something proper." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small emerald set in it. "The stone reminded me of your eyes," he said, suddenly feeling nervous. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. "Declan, it is beautiful. It is perfect." He slipped it onto her finger, and they both stared at it for a moment, this symbol of their commitment. "When do you want to get married?" he asked. "As soon as possible. I do not want to wait. Is that too forward?" he laughed, pulling her close. "Not at all. How about Christmas?" "That gives us a few weeks to plan." "Christmas sounds perfect." They were married on Christmas Eve in the small church in Oro Grande, with the whole town in attendance. Lily wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew, and she carried a bouquet of winter wildflowers that Declan had ridden for hours to find. Declan wore his father's best suit, altered to fit him, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, his kiss was witnessed by cheers and applause. The reception was held at the ranch, which had been fully rebuilt, and then some. The barn was bigger than before, the house had a new room added on, and everything was decorated with pine boughs and ribbons for the occasion. There was music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat, and Declan felt like his heart might burst with happiness. As the sun set and the party continued, he and Lily slipped away to the porch, their special place, and sat together watching the sky turn colors. "Mrs. Walsh," he said, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that." "So do I, Mr. Walsh, so do I." She rested her head on his shoulder. "What do you think our life will be like?" "I think it will be hard work and long days. I think there will be challenges and setbacks. But I also think it will be full of love and laughter and watching our children grow up under these big skies." He paused. "Do you want children?" "I do. Lots of them. Enough to fill that big house you are always talking about building." "Then we better get started," he said with a grin, and she swatted his arm playfully. They stayed out there until the stars came out, making plans and dreaming dreams, and when they finally went inside to their bedroom to start their married life properly, Declan sent up a silent prayer of thanks for everything that had led him to this moment. The years that followed were everything Declan had hoped for and more. The railroad eventually rerouted their expansion, leaving the Walsh Ranch and Oro Grande alone. Several executives were prosecuted for their crimes, and the company paid out substantial restitution to all the landowners who had been victimized. Declan used his share to expand the ranch, buying neighboring land from families who wanted to sell and building up one of the finest cattle operations in the territory. Lily continued teaching for 3 more years, until their first child was born. Declan had been pacing outside the bedroom for hours while the midwife worked, and when he finally heard the baby's cry, he nearly broke down the door in his eagerness to get inside. "You have a son," the midwife announced, and Lily held out the tiny bundle to him with a tired but radiant smile. Declan took his son in his trembling hands, staring down at the red, wrinkled face in wonder. "He is perfect," he breathed. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Lily asked. "Thomas, after my father, Thomas William Walsh." Over the next 8 years, 3 more children joined Thomas. A daughter they named Mary after Declan's mother, then another son called Patrick, and finally another daughter, Catherine. The house Declan had dreamed of building became a reality, a sprawling ranch house with 6 bedrooms and a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The orchards expanded, the cattle herd grew, and the Walsh Ranch became a fixture in New Mexico, known for quality livestock and fair dealing. Lily found that she loved ranch life more than she ever expected. She taught the children their lessons at home, filling their minds with literature and mathematics and history. But she also taught them about the land, about the value of hard work, about standing up for what was right. The story of how their father had fought the railroad became a family legend, told and retold around the dinner table. Declan proved to be a devoted father and husband. He worked hard, but he always made time for his family. Sunday afternoons were sacred, reserved for family picnics by the creek or rides through the property. He taught each of his children to ride, to rope cattle, to respect the land that sustained them. And every night, after the children were in bed, he would sit on the porch with Lily, playing his harmonica while she read or sewed, comfortable in the silence that comes from true companionship. The town of Oro Grande prospered too. The railroad eventually did come through, but on a route that benefited the town without destroying the ranches. The school that Lily had started grew into a proper institution with multiple teachers. The population swelled, and what had been a rough frontier town transformed into a thriving community. But through all the changes, some things remained constant. The Walsh Ranch stood as a testament to the power of determination, to the idea that some things were not for sale at any price. The land that Declan's parents had claimed and worked, that he had fought to keep, became a legacy for his children and grandchildren. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Declan and Lily stood on the same hill where they had shared so many important moments. Their children were grown now. Thomas was 20 and running half the ranch operations. Mary was 18 and engaged to be married. Patrick was 16 and already showing the same stubborn determination as his father, and Catherine was 12 and as bookish as her mother had been. "Do you ever regret it?" Declan asked, his arm around Lily's waist. "Leaving Boston, giving up city life for all this," Lily laughed, the same musical sound that had captivated him 2 decades ago. "Not for a single moment. This is my home, Declan. You are my home. This life we built together is everything I never knew I wanted." He kissed her then, with all the passion and tenderness of a man still deeply in love with his wife. "I love you, Lily Walsh, more today than the day I married you. And I love you, Cowboy." My stubborn, wonderful cowboy who would not sell his land. They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, the land stretching out before them in all its wild beauty. In the distance, they could see the cattle grazing peacefully, the orchards heavy with fruit, the house full of the life and laughter of their family. Declan thought about that day so long ago when the railroad men had first come with their offers and their threats. He thought about how close he had come to losing everything, and how fighting for what he believed in had brought him more than he could have imagined. The land was still his, passed down from his parents and soon to be passed down to his children. But more than that, he had found love, family, purpose, and a sense of belonging that no amount of money could ever buy. Some things were not for sale at any price. Love was one of them. Home was another. And standing there with Lily, watching the sunset over the land he loved, Declan knew he had both. The years continued to pass in the way they do in a life well lived, marked by seasons of planting and harvest, by births and deaths, by joys and sorrows shared. Thomas eventually married a rancher's daughter from Santa Fe, a spirited young woman named Alina who fit into the family as though she had always been there. They gave Declan and Lily their first grandchildren, twin boys who inherited their grandfather's stubbornness and their grandmother's intelligence. Mary married her sweetheart and moved to Albuquerque, where her husband worked as a lawyer. She often joked that watching her father fight the railroad had inspired her choice of husband, someone who fought for justice with words instead of guns. She and her husband visited often, bringing their 3 daughters to run wild on the ranch during summers, learning to love the land as their mother had. Patrick, true to form, wanted to forge his own path. He took a portion of the ranch and started a horse breeding operation that became renowned throughout the territory. His horses were known for their strength and temperament, and he built a thriving business that complemented the cattle operation rather than competing with it. He married late, at 30, to a widow with 2 children who he loved as his own, and together they added 2 more to the family. Catherine, the youngest, became a teacher like her mother, taking over the Oro Grande School when the previous teacher retired. She married one of the other teachers, a quiet man who adored her, and they had 4 children who kept the schoolhouse lively with their presence. Declan watched his children grow and thrive, watched his grandchildren run through the same fields he had played in as a boy, and felt a satisfaction deeper than anything he could put into words. The ranch that he had fought so hard to keep had become the foundation for an entire dynasty, a place where family gathered and memories were made. He and Lily grew old together in the house they had built, their hair turning silver, their hands becoming gnarled with arthritis, but their love never diminishing. They still sat on the porch every evening, still watched the sunsets paint the sky, still held hands like young sweethearts. The 20th century arrived, bringing with it automobiles and telephones and a changing world, but the Walsh Ranch remained a constant, a piece of the Old West preserved in time. Declan refused to modernize too much, insisting that some things were better done the old way, with horses and hard work and respect for the land. On a warm summer evening in 1912, Declan and Lily sat on the porch as usual, surrounded by children and grandchildren who had come for Sunday dinner. The sun was setting and someone had brought out a guitar. Music filled the air, along with laughter and the sounds of children playing. Lily leaned against Declan, her head on his shoulder, and sighed contentedly. "This is everything, is it not? This is what we fought for." "It is," Declan agreed, his voice rough with age but still strong. "Every bit of it. You remember that first night when you helped me find the boarding house? I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen and being terrified that I would say something stupid." She laughed. "And then you hardly spoke at all. I was too busy being tongue-tied." He squeezed her hand gently. "Best decision I ever made, walking you to that boarding house. Led to everything good in my life. We were lucky, Declan. Lucky to find each other, lucky to fight for what mattered, lucky to build all this." "It was not luck," he said firmly. "It was choice. We chose to fight, to believe in something bigger than ourselves, to build a life based on love and principle. That was not luck, that was decision." Their oldest grandson, one of Thomas's twins, came running up to the porch. "Grandpa, tell us the story about the railroad again." Declan looked at Lily, who smiled and nodded. He had told this story 100 times, but it never got old, especially seeing the wonder in the children's eyes. "All right then, gather around. It was 1878, and I was about the age your father is now, running this ranch alone after my parents passed." He told the story as the sun set, about standing his ground, about meeting the beautiful schoolteacher who would become his wife, about fighting for what was right even when it seemed impossible. The children listened with rapt attention, even though they had heard it before, because it was their history, their legacy, the foundation of everything they were. When he finished, young Thomas asked, "Were you scared, Grandpa?" "Terrified," Declan admitted. "But being scared does not mean you give up. It means you find the courage to keep going anyway. And I had help." He pulled Lily closer. "Your grandmother was the bravest person I ever met, still is." As the evening wore on and the family gradually dispersed, Declan and Lily remained on the porch. The stars were coming out, brilliant in the clear desert sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "Declan," Lily said softly, "promise me something, anything. Promise me that when we are gone, our children will remember what this place means. That it is not just land or property, but a symbol of everything we believed in. That they will pass that down to their children. I promise. Though I hope we have many more years before anyone needs to worry about that. I do too, but I want to make sure it is said." She turned to look at him, her green eyes still bright despite the wrinkles around them. "I love you, Declan Walsh. Every day for 34 years I have loved you more than the day before. And I love you, Lily Walsh. You made my life complete." They sat there under the stars, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had fought for their future and won, who had built a legacy that would endure for generations. The land stretched out around them, the same land that had been the center of their story from the beginning, and it would be there long after they were gone, a testament to the truth that some things are not for sale at any price. The seasons turned, and Declan and Lily continued their quiet life on the ranch, surrounded by family and the land they loved. Declan finally agreed to get a telephone installed, mostly so the grandchildren could call more easily, though he grumbled about the invasion of modern technology. Lily started a tradition of Sunday family dinners that became sacred, with children and grandchildren traveling from across New Mexico to gather at the big table Declan had built years ago. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1918 with a party that brought together everyone whose lives they had touched. Former students of Lily's, now grown with children of their own, came to pay their respects. Neighboring ranchers, some who had stood with Declan against the railroad all those years ago, shared stories and toasts. The house overflowed with people, with laughter, with love. Marcus Dalton, the lawyer who had helped them fight the railroad, made the trip from Santa Fe despite his advanced age. He raised his glass in a toast that brought tears to many eyes. "To Declan and Lily Walsh," he said, his voice strong despite his 80-some years, "who showed us all what courage looks like, what integrity means, and what love can build. May their example inspire generations to come. Declan stood to respond, Lily beside him, and looked out at the assembled crowd, at the sea of faces that represented their life's work and impact. 40 years ago, he began, I was alone on this ranch, thinking my life would be nothing but work and loneliness. Then a beautiful woman arrived from Boston, and everything changed. Lily taught me that fighting for what you believe in is important, but so is knowing what you are fighting for. We did not just fight to keep land. We fought to build a home, a family, a legacy of doing what is right even when it is hard. Thank you all for being part of that journey. The party lasted until well past midnight, and when everyone finally left or settled into the various bedrooms and bunkhouses for the night, Declan and Lily found themselves alone on their porch once again. 40 years, Lily mused. Where did they go? Into every day we spent together. Into every child we raised, every sunset we watched, every challenge we overcame. He took her hand, his thumb rubbing over her wedding ring worn smooth after 4 decades. I would live them all again exactly the same way. Even the scary parts, the fire, the threats, the fear. Especially those. They made the victory sweeter, made us stronger, made us appreciate what we had all the more. They sat in comfortable silence, and Declan found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From that first moment when he had stepped in to help a frightened woman outside a saloon, through courtship and marriage, through raising children and building a life, through every triumph and setback. It had all led to this moment, this perfect peace. The years continued their steady march. Declan and Lily aged gracefully, their pace slowing but their minds remaining sharp. They spent their days in quiet contentment, reading together in the morning, taking slow walks through the property in the afternoon, sitting on the porch in the evening. The ranch was largely run by Thomas and Patrick now, though Declan still consulted on major decisions, his decades of experience invaluable. Great-grandchildren started arriving, and Lily delighted in holding the tiny bundles, seeing the future of the family in their innocent faces. Declan would sit beside her, his weathered hand gently touching the soft baby cheeks, marveling at the continuation of their legacy. One evening in the spring of 1925, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Declan felt a strange peace settle over him. He was 79 years old, and Lily was 72, and they had lived a full, rich life together. The ranch was thriving under the management of their children. The family was strong and close-knit. Everything they had fought for had been preserved and would continue for generations. "Do you remember that sunset the day I proposed?" Declan asked, watching the sky turn gold and red. "Of course. You were so nervous, fumbling over your words. I was terrified you would say no. I was terrified you would never ask." She squeezed his hand. "Best decision I ever made, saying yes to you. Best decision I ever made was standing my ground when the railroad came calling. Not because of the land, though I love it, but because fighting for this place led me to you, and you led me to everything else that matters." They watched the sun disappear below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and pink. The land spread out before them, alive with the sounds of evening, cattle lowing in the distance, birds settling in for the night, the gentle rustle of wind through the grass. "We did good, did we not?" Lily asked softly. "We did better than good. We built something that will last, something that means something. Not just a ranch, but a testament to the power of conviction, of love, of standing up for what is right." He turned to look at her, this woman who had been his partner in every sense of the word for nearly half a century. "I love you, Lily. I have loved you every day of our life together, and I will love you beyond this life into whatever comes next. And I love you, Declan. You made me brave. You showed me that home is not a place but a choice, and I chose you, chose this life, and I have never regretted it for a single moment." They stayed there long after the stars came out, holding hands and remembering, celebrating silently all the years they had shared and the legacy they had built together. Declan passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, in the fall of 1927, at the age of 81. He died in the house he had been born in, surrounded by family with Lily holding his hand. His last words were, "I can see them, my parents, waiting by the creek. Tell the children to take care of the land. Some things are not for sale." Lily lived for 3 more years, long enough to see their great-grandson, another Declan Walsh, born and baptized. She spent those years telling stories to anyone who would listen, making sure the family history was preserved, that the younger generations understood what their grandfather had stood for. She passed away in 1930, on a warm summer evening, sitting on the porch she had loved so much. Thomas found her there, a peaceful smile on her face, her eyes closed as if she had simply fallen asleep watching the sunset. In her lap was the harmonica that Declan used to play, and in her pocket was a worn letter he had written her during their courtship, declaring his love. They buried her next to Declan on the hill overlooking the creek, where his parents were also buried. The entire family gathered, along with half of Oro Grande and people from across New Mexico who had known and loved them. The headstone read, "Lily Walsh, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. Teacher of wisdom and courage. 1853–1930. Reunited with her Cowboy. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants. Thomas ran it for another 20 years before passing it to his own son." The house became a gathering place for the sprawling Walsh family, a living museum of the past combined with the energy of the present. The story of how Declan had stood up to the railroad became legendary in New Mexico, taught in schools as an example of integrity and courage. The fight itself had changed how railroads operated, leading to regulations that protected landowners from corporate intimidation. Declan and Lily had not just saved their own land, they had helped countless others. But their greatest legacy was not the land or the law or even the thriving ranch. It was the family they had built, the values they had instilled, the love they had shared so openly that it became a model for generations to come. At family gatherings, the stories were still told, about the cowboy who refused to sell and the schoolteacher from Boston who became his partner in every way that mattered. The porch where they had spent so many evenings was preserved exactly as it had been, with 2 rocking chairs always ready, facing the sunset. Their descendants made a point of sitting there sometimes, especially during important moments in their lives, feeling the presence of Declan and Lily in the wind and the land and the endless sky. The Walsh Ranch stood as a testament to a simple truth that Declan had understood from the beginning. Some things are not for sale at any price. Love, family, home, integrity, these cannot be bought or sold. They can only be built, protected, and passed down through generations of people willing to fight for what matters. And in the heart of New Mexico, on 500 acres of beautiful land that had witnessed so much history, that truth remained as solid and enduring as the mountains themselves, a legacy that would continue long after the last Walsh who had known Declan and Lily personally had passed on. The land remembered, the family remembered, and the story lived on, inspiring each new generation to stand up for what they believed in, to fight for what mattered, to build lives of purpose and meaning. Some things, as Declan Walsh had proven, are simply not for sale.